Hej och välkomna till Didaktiska laboratoriet som kommer vara det sista inlägget i en serie av rapportdagböcker berörande den rapport som jag har skrivit under min sista termin. I det här inlägget kommer jag att visa en inspelning ifrån den presentation som jag höll vid Tokyo Gakugei där jag gick igenom rapportens bakgrund och tidigare forskning och de intervjuer som jag har hållit med ett fokus på ett analysarbete som redogör då för de slutsatser jag kommer fram till. Så jag hoppas att ni kommer finna den här presentationen intressant. Den är cirka 15 minuter lång, den hålls på engelska och det kommer finnas undertexter till den. Välkomna!
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining my presentation. The topic of my report is comparison of Japanese and Swedish high school teachers' cultures. This presentation has a QR code, as you can see here down on the left, so anyone who wishes to download this presentation can do so throughout the entire presentation. So my name is Fredrik Norman and I come from Sweden, where I work as a high school teacher. And there are many features that were interesting to me to observe as part of this research, but I'm going to focus on three particular topics, which are collaboration, skill improvement, and peer learning. The outline of this presentation is based on three parts, where I will begin with the research background. I will then follow up with the interview data and the analysis of said data. And finally, we will look on the conclusions and what can be considered for future research. So let's start straight at it at part one. In the research background, I will look at what is actually research concerning Sweden and Japan. And my country, Sweden, has many issues when it comes to collaboration and when it comes to teachers' cultures in general. And the very first of them is that there's plenty of research that illustrates that there is no tradition of collaboration. Actually, rather, teachers have a strong background of autonomy. That means that teachers in general work exclusively alone. Sure, Swedish teachers do have colleagues that they sit together with and they belong to teams, but all decisions that are made by the teachers are made by the teachers themselves. So this autonomy gives teachers a unique position of not having to necessarily speak with their principals when they want to make educational decisions. And furthermore, as of the latest curriculum that was delivered in 2011, differences or being unique as a teacher is considered a great asset. That means that you should be different. That is a typical feature of the Swedish educational system. And finally, one of the greater differences when comparing Sweden and Japan is that there exists no extracurricular activities for teachers in Sweden. When you're done teaching, you're done with teaching. And the same thing goes for the renowned entrance examination that exists in Japan. We don't have anything like that either in Sweden. Moving on to Japan, Japanese teachers, on the other hand, have a very long history of collaboration. It's been studied for quite some time, but in general, two things stand out. Teachers work longer throughout their working day compared to Swedish teachers, but also they are expected to share their workload. This can be seen permeating from many different areas. One of them is a hierarchy, a social structure where there are people who control at the top, usually a board of education, which then seeps down to each and every teacher from beneath them. And also, within the teachers themselves, there are senior and junior structures. So the senior teachers, they teach the junior teachers and they follow their methods. Moreover, the teachers have, as compared with Sweden, both extracurricular activities. They're not only expected to teach, but they're also expected to work with other subjects apart from teaching. Moreover, there's also the entrance examination, which forms many parts of education as we know it, which means that the exam in some way becomes the goal of education. as of such, we've seen that there's been studies made on how teachers work, but I wanted to approach this from a bit of a different angle. And the first one of them is, how do you actually create a culture for collaboration? So I wanted to see how schools worked to enable those kind of situations. And secondly, I wanted to speak with the teachers themselves. What are their experiences? Thirdly, how can this be understood when we compare it with the Swedish context? And the fourth question is, what can actually teachers learn from this data? Because often teachers feel that research is out there somewhere. It's abstract. It's never applicable in your regular day life. And I wanted to look at that as well. So, as such, we will enter into the interview data itself, and we will consider here what actually the teachers and one vice principal said. So, my research approach has already been mentioned. But to follow that up, I looked at the previous research, and there's primarily been three major ideas when looking at how teacher cultures are made. Those are concerning the teacher's beliefs, what is believed to be a good teaching culture, how these teachers practice it, and also how they interact. To understand this, I approached it from a semi-structured interview approach. That means that I spoke with the teachers, I had them deliver what they thought was important on this topic, and eventually this was resulting in a narrative strategy of inquiry, which means that I take their data and I retell it as a story that tries to explain it as well as possible. The amount of teachers that I talked with are 6, and there's 1 vice principal. And already here we can see some limitations of my research. I wanted to have 2 different vice principals because I visited 2 different schools. But unfortunately, due to the entrance exam, funnily enough, they weren't able to join. So we're lacking part of the data here. So let us look at the first school. This is school A, and this is the vice principal. And the first thing that the vice principal explained is that the school has a strong top-down, doesn't have a strong top-down structure. Rather, the vice principal explained that he lets the teachers do what they want to do. When it comes to collaboration and peer learning, at school A, the teachers in general observe each other. They go to different schools and they see, okay, what can I learn from other teachers? And as of this, the vice principal explained that at their school, there is a culture of sharing your workload. As a teacher, you're expected to share your workload with each other, and if you don't, there's social strains, which means that as a teacher, you will become a burden to other teachers. The vice principal, when I asked him, so what do teachers think about collaboration? What do teachers feel about sharing their workload with each other? He said, and I quote, that wonderful teachers, they are confident. Teachers who are not confident do not feel the same way, end quote. So what this means is that a teacher who shares, a teacher who always makes sure that they share the workload with each other are considered to be wonderful. From this data, we can understand that class observations, together with, for example, professors and such, leads to skill improvement. However, skill improvement in general is only performed during either holidays or weekends due to the heavy workload of club activities, and that these socially burdens other teachers in case they don't do them. Let's move on to the teachers at the very same school. They said that, yes, indeed, it is correct as our vice principal says, we have greater autonomy, we can do as we wish. And one of the main reasons that they see a positive collaborative culture is because of a shared office. All the teachers sit in the same room, so teachers who share the same subject. In this case, there were English teachers. They sit together and they can talk with each other, which benefits to their collaborative culture. They can learn from each other, they can see how things work because they actually sit close to each other. And as of that, regular day discussions just pops up, whatever they have considerations about is argued to be the main reason why these teachers develop professionally. And there was one teacher who I spoke with when concerning this shared culture who said, and I quote, that there is an atmosphere, we kind of have to do the same thing all together. So sometimes it's not as independent. It's difficult to say, if there's extra work, we can't go home, we have to do it all together, end quote. So from this, we can understand that at this school, they do have observations, but in fact, the formal training has less impact to these teachers. They see each other, but the most important thing is the over-the-desk, everyday conversation, which leads to greater amount of peer learning and greater amount of collaboration as well. And furthermore, from all of the teachers who I spoke with, everyone agreed that extracurricular activities such as clubs and so on, which is usually done during either holidays or weekends, have negative impact for their learning. The second school that I visited, called School B, explained that in contrast to the previous school, they have a strong top-down structure. They have a board of education which dictates in many ways what they're supposed to do. This leads to teachers having to work around the entrance exam. They sit in different places, and they feel that in many ways the entrance exam limits their way of teaching, because they only have to consider the goals of the exams rather than their kind of creative approach to teaching. That has led to these teachers to develop in off-school situations. This means that they actually try to see whatever other options there are for them to learn. And one teacher said concerning their professional development at their school, and I quote, "It's like lectures by a supervisor. It can be any kind of topic. It is not professional development, more like to be a faithful servant. They just want to do something with teachers. They just want to show that they try to improve teachers. It's superficial," end quote. So from this, we can understand that at the school, where there's a strong structure from above, the teachers go elsewhere to learn. They even host their own informal learning situations because they believe that this kind of learning is very important to them, and that club activities are time-consuming and unbeneficial to the teaching as well. We will now move on to the last part, which is conclusions and considerations, and I will try to analyze and compare the data with the previous research. So we will answer the research questions, and the first is, how are these collaborative cultures created? Well, it seems that whenever the board of education or the vice principal delegates authority to the teachers, collaboration improves. The teachers feel that they own their questions and their teaching, and they can move on. Moreover, we can also understand that the entrance exam has a negative impact on collaboration and peer learning. This is in line with previous research as well. And therefore, sharing responsibilities with teachers, feeling that we have to do the same thing as others, have both positive and negative impact. These are answered in the teacher's experiences, where the teacher says that, well, okay, shared work and sitting together creates a positive climate for collaboration. This is new and hasn't been found in the previous research body. Moreover, these social or unspoken expectations that teachers have to share things with each other both limits and unifies the way they practice peer learning, because they feel that they have to be in sync with each other. They want to develop, but they also have to stay similar to one another. And lastly, we can understand that a school that has a strong frame because of the entrance exam and because of the club activities has strain on the interaction of teachers, because they feel that they have to spend most times doing things not related to teaching. Compared to Sweden, we can immediately understand that the idea of the wonderful teacher, as mentioned by the vice principal, goes in stark contrast to the Swedish idea of being unique or individual. So it doesn't work with the idea that individuality is an asset. Moreover, this illustrates a cultural contrast where the idea of unity and individuality are in clash with one another. So therefore, unity is fundamentally undesirable in Sweden, and the other hand, it's desirable in Japan. Furthermore, we can see that these have different outcomes in a teacher. A teacher in Japan is supposed to be similar to one another, and in Sweden you're not supposed to be similar. Joining these three things, we can finally learn that in Japanese schools, there are structures that both benefit learning, but also limit learning at the same time. There's like a two-sided coin here. And moreover, in the Swedish context, we can see that traditions are very different, but also we can understand that the image of a teacher is different because teachers have different responsibilities. Finally, some considerations. Obviously, my research lacked data from one respondent, and this is something that, if it could have been improved, it would primarily have been this part. To consider future research, if it would have been done, the first thing I think would be interesting to look at is the effect of increased autonomy and delegation of authority to teachers. How would this, in the long run, affect Japanese teacher cultures? Because this is a rather new phenomenon. And also, it would be interesting if we would look at it from a Swedish perspective, in what way that peer learning and have collaboration as a common part of teaching, how would it affect the strong individuality of Swedish teachers' cultures? Thank you very much. This is the last part, which is the Q&A. So any questions? Thank you so much.
Kommentera gärna med era reflektioner kring japanska lärare finner sig begränsade på grund av inträdesproven, och hur skulle er undervisning påverkas av en liknande situation, och vilka för- och nackdelar ser ni med en delad arbetsyta? Och slutligen, hur tror ni att den svenska lärarkulturen skulle påverkas av ökat samarbete och ett delat ansvar?
Ni har följt mitt arbete med rapporten med alla dess steg som har lett fram till den här avslutande presentationen. Välkomna åter!